Sorry. Welcome back, everybody, to the reconvened deliberations for our LTP this morning. I would like to start our proceedings with the karakia and taking from Marty this morning. I think it would be really nice if we all said our timitanga together. So, mai te paimonga, raro ki te tai, mai te awatanga, raro ki te awaraki, tēnei te hapori, are ai taratai. Whanau, ai te tauki, Thank you. I haven't received any apologies, but perhaps we could record the mayor for lateness. Thank you. Moving forward, so the process just for today's deliberations, there is a report from the CE which was emailed out to everybody, and we can pass on copies. I think that's the one. That's the report. So we will table that. It's kind of a here's what's changed. And so the process is to continue and conclude the deliberations with decisions and recommendations to be considered by the full council.
No,
You're good?
I've done it.
Excuse me. At the to be considered by full council at the extraordinary council meeting, once external advice that has been requested has been received. My recommendation is that in consultation with CE that possibly next Wednesday for the extraordinary council meeting.
It would give us sufficient time in order to update deliberations, potentially have a new rates number and prepare the paper for the extraordinary meeting to adopt.
Fantastic. Thank you. So therein lies the process for today. So with that, we shall move on and hand over to you, Jeff, the long-term plan changes post-consultation report that you had previously circulated to all members.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper that I've circulated and is now tabled in this meeting, public meeting, is identifying the changes that have occurred from the long-term plan when the draft long-term plan, which was adopted for consultation during March, and the changes that have occurred in the last 2 months. Now, some of those changes have negatively impacted on the rates number, and others of those changes positively impact on the rates numbers, and they are all included in that paper there, including the estimated impact on rates. I'm happy to take questions, noting that there is obviously quite a lot of things that have moved.
So members, I open up for any questions for our CE around the table. Councillor Cretney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff, I have a question around the addition of the Wainoa Processed Water Project. Is that the total funding? And if it is, I question why that wasn't put into the consultation document, because we actually approved a significant amount of that funding on the 28th of February.
If you could remind me, Councillor Cretney, what was approved on the 28th of February?
We approved the project. We approved the funding and everything towards that project in February, 28th of February.
And the project came back to council meeting because there had been a change and a change in scope, and we sought council's approval to include it after we adopted the LTP consultation document.
But that was in between creating the long-term plan consultation document.
But
what I'm suggesting is we knew the budget for the Wainoa Water Project, and we approved the extra budget. Council put to us, management put to us, that we choose to not go ahead with it. That was your preferred option. We voted to go ahead with it. So is that not the premise that those figures go into the long-term plan and into the consultation document?
I think at that time, the project, we were processing through gates, and we agreed with council that we would take it through to each gate as the project proceeded, as we learnt more information. And we were still in that process when we adopted the draft consultation document.
So I'm pretty sure that that it was our meeting in March. It was after, as council had adopted the consultation document, following lots of workshops about what we as elected members wanted included in that consultation document. And then I think the Wainawa project was voted on again in March, which was after we had adopted, was it March, I think, which was after the consultation document had been.
That's correct. That was for extra funding. But we'd already approved the project to go ahead with the initial funding. And then it was asked for extra funding. So we'd already approved as a council, we want this project to go ahead. So at that point, council had given you the directive to go ahead with the project. So for me, the project is going ahead. So those costings should be have been included in the LTP.
And the consultation document, do you mean?
The consultation document hadn't been finalised at that point.
So are you saying, sorry, I'm just clarifying the question, that you are saying that you believe, why wasn't this included in the consultation document? Is that your question?
That's what I'm saying.
Is that your question, yes or no? Why was this not included in the consultation document?
Why was it not included in the figures that have gone out, the percentage that's gone out?
In the consultation document?
Well, the percentage that's the average rates percentage that is in the consultation document.
Thank you, in the consultation document.
Can I check?
The policy and project was actually the policy and projects committee recommends council officers undertake further investigation and report back to council on the 27th of March 2004. So there was another gateway. So that was the recommendation from the policy and projects meeting in February, was to report back to council.
I believe that is correct. So it was further investigation. So the project wasn't approved to include in the plan at that time.
The February paper was actually officers recommending not to proceed with the project because of the costs.
Mm-hmm.
And we were asked to undertake further investigation.
So just as a reminder that we as council did sign off on the consultation document and everything that was in it given that time. And I'm pretty sure it was a unanimous decision to adopt that consultation document. So I think relitigating what was in and what wasn't in is probably not helpful right at this point. I think we need to keep our questions to the report.
And I do recall that was a workshop. We were specifically told that the Wainawa project wasn't in the list of projects, and that was we were going to consult on. So I certainly knew it wasn't in there.
It wasn't a project we were consulting on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is only transport and wastewater.
No, but that it wasn't in the long-term plan. That's
Are there any questions about CE? Further questions? Seeking any clarification on the report that we have in front of us regarding the changes post the consultation? Councillor Lawrence.
I think you just said before that it would be next Wednesday before you could come up with a new rates number, but based on where we are here, pluses and minuses, what's your estimate of where we are in relation to the 15.09 that we?
14.7.
Okay, so slightly less.
And does that, following on from your question, does
In
that
year one.
In year one, so does that take into account decisions that through the deliberations we have already recommended to go up to council, or is that just at today's point in time?
That would be before we started hearings and deliberations. So that's the up to that point. Doesn't include any decisions made out of deliberations today. They haven't been adopted by council, so they're not included.
So it does include the Wainawa Water Project
It does include the
at
Wainawa.
14.7.
14.7.
14.7.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But
Yeah, carry on, councillor Lawrence.
the 14.7 at this stage includes $2.4 million worth of expenditure on cycle trails.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, despite the fact that deliberation so far, we've decided not to do that.
No.
Can I just clarify, we have removed year 3 of the cycle trail, which was 600,000.
Yes. The remainder.
Won't impact the 14.
Yes. So that's year 3, but it
That's
won't
year
affect
3.
14.7.
Year 1 still. remains.
Yeah, that's correct. The cycle trails are in.
They're in the 14.7.
Yes, in year 1 and 2.
Yes. But from where we've got to, we're not proposing to spend that 2.4. So
That will reduce.
a little bit.
Yeah. So the rough rule of thumb we're working on is $2 million of capex is 1% on rate, and $200,000 worth of OPEX is 1% on rate. The modelling means that the capex benefit usually occurs mostly in the following year, because we just the way the budget works, you assume you spend half of the money during the year, so you've only got half of the cost. And so, but you are correct.
So
It will impact, it will benefit the
Karen?
years.
Sorry, just to also clarify, and to Jeff saying, these, whilst we've come down to 7, still subject to audit.
oh yeah,
And so that number is still kind of open to movement, some hopefully not significant, but it is going to be moving.
but just at the risk of.
No, keep going.
Um,
Questions are good to clarify.
so does that mean if we take roughly $2 million out, that we're at 13.7, or is it most of that in the out years, so it doesn't affect this person?
It will mostly, if you take $2 million of capex out in year 1,
Yeah.
it will mostly benefit year 2. There will be some benefit in year 1, but most of the benefit will show up later. If you take $200,000 worth of OPEX out, it will all benefit year 1.
That clarify for
Yep.
you?
Sorry.
Councillor Alien, you had a question?
Well, I thought we had an email saying it was 300,000 and 3 million respectively for the OPEX and CAPEX just last week. Maybe
2.
was
Okay.
it 2?
2.
Okay.
2.
I thought I'd seen 3 and I thought, flip, that's changed drastically.
No.
Okay, 2.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, not a question. I guess this report really just highlights to us all just how dynamic this process is. And, you know, it's like trying to herd chickens. Because there's so many factors at play, notwithstanding audit. But also just even updating costs and trying to get a handle on things. And as Jeff said, deliberations haven't been factored into this yet either.
And we get updated information from Wakakotahi, subsidy. We get new information from insurance around those costs. It's in front of you now.
If there are no more questions,
I have another question.
yep, go.
Can you, if we've got to 14.7, what about the out years? Roughly, what are you looking at? I'm talking about 2 and 3, not.
2 and 3 is there's very little change in the out years on 2 or 3. So we move capex from year 2 to year 3. There's very little difference, and there's not a lot of operational cost change between those years. So we haven't banked some of the savings, but I think the total sum of years 2 and 3, I think I included in the paper, is about 1% moving. So it's not significant in the out years.
But we are still looking at a significantly lower increase in the second year than we are in the first year.
Yes, and particularly after deliberations are included, yes.
Councillor Aileen.
So another question. 1 week ago, we got the email saying that the rates were going to be 17.5 on average. And you're saying that we haven't changed anything since deliberations. How has that number gone so significantly lower in the last week?
I think you'll find my email of a week ago also included the fact that staff were looking at savings and that I thought we were roughly at a number slightly below. So you read the first part of the email, you didn't finish reading the email which talked about the savings.
Any other questions or comments?
Another question.
Oh, Steve, the Steve Lawrence show this morning. I love it.
Yeah, maybe not. We had a previous discussion around the option of averaging the rates, smoothing the rates. Is that still a possibility to even out the rates so that even if we just average them over the first 3 years or smooth them over the first 3 years, is that still an option?
That's a great question. So some of the councils are attempting to smooth. I noticed Upper Hutt smoothing is over a 3-year period. And if we were to have adopted a smoothing, we really should have consulted on smoothing over the 3-year period. What we can do now is if there is a change in the number from the draft LTP that we consulted on to a different number, we can smooth that difference, but we can't smooth the whole number. So, for example, if the number was 15% and it moves to 17, we could smooth the 2% difference. We couldn't smooth the entire 17. And I would take direction from Chair, but wonder whether or not Philip Jones may be able to provide some further advice on that.
Thank you, Jeff. I was about to ask Philip if you could.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff is entirely correct because you didn't consult on smoothing, right? You would have difficulty changing the smoothing. The other issue is, and this is a risk for council, the year 2 numbers, right? And I don't want to be unkind to staff, right? That's what I think, well, they put me over here, right? It's like a beat me up if I was too unkind. It's a best guess, right? Numbers will change next year. That is the biggest risk. And we've already heard about insurance, right? As one example. That could go up or could go down. That will impact on next year's number. So while you're saying the number, I haven't got the number in front of me, right? So make it easy on my brain. I like round numbers, 10, right? And you move 2 from this year to next year. So next year moves from 10 to 12. There are 2 things you've got to consider. One is 10 is a best guess, so that could go up to 12 and you've still got the 2 to recover. Plus also the learned friend on my left will have a cash flow shortage. So you're not going to get 2% of your income in. So she's going to have to borrow that difference between the 17 and the 15, which is going to be at a higher rate because you actually haven't budgeted for that. So there's a cash flow perspective that you've got to consider. And also, I'd just like to remind council that they have their performance appraisal next year with the community. And no, there will be pressure on council to reduce the rates, not increase the rates. I'm always nervous when councils smooth rates. Now, I was the author of one of the smoothings originally, but I'm actually comfortable with smoothing rates where you're seeing a progressive change in targeted rates. So, for example, you might have, this might be a solution, you might see your water rate going from, I don't want to put numbers into anyone's heads, right?
So the numbers, just for clarification for anybody listening, the numbers Philip quoting are hypothetical numbers to use as examples.
Correct.
They are not fact.
They are not fact. Thank you. So say, and as I said, for example, your water rate was currently $300, but you might want to increase it to $600 because of the work that you needed to do, like some other councils in the country, not like this council. So you might say, we'll increase it this year to 450 and then 610 in the subsequent year to play catch up. That's the sort of approach I'm more familiar with rather than smoothing the general rate because of the accumulation of general rates, but it is an acceptable method of doing it. I've got one council that's proposing to do it over 6 years. They've gone out for consultation on that. Whether the community agree with that is up to the community. But again, that's almost a contract with the community that this is what will happen next year as a result.
And so that would be a discussion next year, not part of this LTV.
When you came to your formal adoption, you would have to note that.
Right. Okay.
In your formal adoption to say this is the impact. Bearing in mind when you went out to consult, it is a 10-year plan.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding this report or any discussion around the report from Jeff? It's a great report. Thank you. A lot of information in there. Again, that you mentioned, I notice under 4.5 of your report under risks, these were already touched on in the previous audit and risk and assurance meeting earlier. But again, we may have a different audience at the moment. So just sort of reiterating what the risks are that you have highlighted in your report, Jen, please.
Absolutely. I think as much as we like to think that we can do this stuff, we have one person in the organisation who really understands the rating system and how to bill via the rating system. We're obviously training others up into the system, but if the challenges when we get complicated matters such as delaying rates instalments, deferring rates instalments, having wash-ups, we rely on a single individual in order to help us through that. And that's a significant risk. I've certainly highlighted the other risks in there in terms of delaying the adoption. The risks around, as Philip Jones has pointed out, around cash flow, if we delay the first rates invoice, and then there's challenges around not adopting a rate before the end of June and sending out a follow-on from an invoice based on this year's rate and the compounding effect that will have with Greater Wellington. But yeah, the one thing I haven't highlighted in here is we are mostly reliant on a single individual with staff who understand the rating system, but a single individual who comprehensively understands the rating system enough to cope with some quite significant changes that may be coming.
The other, yes. Councillor Aileen.
On page 4, you've said standard audit practice works on the assumption that anything with less than a 5% impact is considered immaterial. I would seek management's assurance that our council don't believe that is fact.
It's 5% of the value of the thing you're looking at. So if we were looking at, say, for example, the roading network, which would be worth maybe worth $100 million, for example, anything that was more than $5 million would be considered material. So I don't want to confuse the rates number with that 5%. It is actually the value of the item that is material. So in the case of a loan balance, it would be a loan balance that is out of order by 5% of the total amount of loans.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions or discussions on this paper, I will move to the one recommendation on page 5. That recommendation is that this paper reflects the report. Do I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Newman, and seconded Councillor Dalla. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Awesome. Right, moving along to our deliberations. So again, information has been requested by the committee at our previous meeting has been circulated. So first discussion point that we will have in deliberations, I will do head count first. So opening the table for questions.
Sorry.
All I was going to note was that I had circulated to the council some additional information.
And just also as a reminder, thank you. Just a reminder that if we just hold front of mind that the head count is a consequence of levels of service. So the conversation or any questions possibly need to be around the levels of service, because that's where we get our head count from. So, Aileen.
Mine wasn't specifically around head count at this point. My question was, I was under the assumption that we were going to be halting continuations on the deliberations at this point until there was further advice around the legality of our long-term plan.
So there was nobody had made a recommendation to move that prior. Are you proposing to?
Absolutely. I was under the assumption
a motion forward. So what would your motion be?
That further deliberations around the long-term plan 2024, 2035,
34
paused, halted until council are comfortable and reassured of the legality and the optics of our long-term plan deliberation consultation process.
Did you get all of that, Robin?
I can shrink it.
Abridged version.
Yep, that we stop today until we have a legal opinion.
So you stopped the deliberations today.
Yeah.
Okay. And your reason for that?
Because as we've been discussing via email over the last week, there's some concerns around our long-term plan process. And there's been a lot of interest among the public around our long-term plan. And so I think it would be prudent and wise for council to pause until we are satisfied as a council that the processes have been followed.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the table by Councillor Aileen that we pause the deliberations of our long-term plan today. Do we have anybody second that? Steve Crackney has seconded that. So I now open it up for discussion.
Nice question. Did you really mean optics?
The optics?
Yeah.
Yep, I did. I mean, I haven't prepared anything to say right now, but I think the legality of the long-term plan is the key issue. However, I think as council, we should be very concerned with the optics of the situation as well and the public opinion around our processes. I think irrespective of if there is a legal thing that we can tick the box and say we consulted correctly, the public may not feel that way when they see that the numbers have been shifted around. So I just think we need to take that into consideration in we're here to represent the people. I think we should care if they are feeling nervous by this process.
I understand the issue around waiting for a legal opinion.
Yeah.
But the lawyer's not going to say anything about optics. Then
no,
kind of don't do that.
No, I'm not suggesting that they give us that assurance. I'm saying as a governance, our table feel comfortable with the optics. I think the legal opinion is first and foremost the priority. I would also think as a council elected by the people, we should care about what the public think on this issue as well, not just the letter of the law.
I'd be interested to see what people think. I don't understand how that.
That's my thinking.
So I've got, sorry, Dale first, then Steve Gallen, then Brian Dalla. So Dale.
My only question would be around, I mean, we've just sat through the risk and assurance and Philip Jones is here talking about risk of delay, risk of pause, risk of non-completion within the very tight time frame. What's your response or thoughts around that?
I felt that the points that were raised in audit and risk were interesting. I thought the comments around the fact that other councils are in the process similar to ours, where they are looking at, okay, what does the section 50, I think it was, provision look like? I think across the board in New Zealand local government, there are questions being raised around the continual growth in rates, and people are going, okay, how do we make this work? Obviously, other than, going to Parliament and telling them to sort out the way we can generate income, rates are what we've got at this point, and people are feeling the pinch. And so I'm just conscious of the fact that other councils are in a position like ours who are going, okay, what can we do differently? And I'm nervous about the fact that we are soldiering on ahead in spite of the fact that there has been queries around the way our long-term plan has been.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you've just raised quite a number of things that are much broader than your resolution that we pause waiting for a legal opinion.
Yeah. I can't solve the rest of them though.
Sorry?
I can't solve the rest of those issues at this point, but.
So can we, councillor?
Yeah, that's really just a question around what benefit do you see, having heard the risks and having heard, being part of the process for the last year and a half, what benefit do you see in following your motion through, pausing and waiting for a legal opinion? Well, how do you see the process evolving after that?
I see, being on the audit and risk thing, the committee, our biggest concern is what are levels of risk, and I see humongous levels of risk around our long-term plan being not watertight. And I think that's what a legal opinion would give us that assurance of. And I'm seeking assurance that our long-term plan has been done correctly. And if there are risks that come of that, I think they would be of a lesser risk to council than our long-term plan being thrown out because it was done in a way that wasn't watertight.
So we will go to councillor Gallen, and then we have councillor Dalla after that.
Sort of some of my thoughts have been, I was going to say that Philip's risk he was talking about. I was thinking about the audit and the timeline. Is there going to be a delay? Is that going to cause does it come back to Philip risk again?
I will go to Philip for advice in a second. Councillor Dalla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My opinion is we don't need to adjourn the deliberations at this stage, as we've got all the information in front of us that has been provided by Jeff and his team. Thank you very much. And all the information requested has been available. So we will, in my opinion, we should, in my opinion, carry on today and work through the rest of the deliberations. No voting is going to happen today. That's going to happen next week. We can then call an extraordinary meeting in 1 week's time when we will all have received all the advice that we need to move forward. And then we can vote on the long-term plan. If we don't deliberate today, next Wednesday is going to be a hell of a day. We've got business all day, and it will go into night as we've got a combined council meeting that day. So we've only basically got half of the daylight and another 4 or 5 hours of dark if we want to do it then. So we're on a tight schedule, and my question to you, Grace, is I know you're saying that you require the information and you want to celebration going ahead. But can you explain more to me about optics and the risk and define the risks, please? You're saying risks, but we haven't actually defined them, and the optics.
So I'd say the risks with regards to public perception and opinion would be that our council loses credibility in the running of business because we have the risk of being seen to not be following the process thoroughly. We have raised queries around the legality and the change in rates number, which we received the night before deliberations, and the fact that on the day of the oral hearings, not one submitter was told that the number had changed potentially. I would say that that is a significant risk. I think the idea that 1 or 2% number movement is immaterial to people is incorrect. I think people care about every point of a percentage, not just the percentage movements. And so I think, I'm quite confident that the people out there will agree that we want to make sure this process is done properly. And I don't think it is just a legal opinion. I think we have the public's perception to take into account.
We're now looking at 14.7 with information that continues to evolve.
Yeah.
So that's actually less than we consulted on.
And we got substantial pushback on the 15.09%.
Is this a free ranging discussion?
So,
Sorry.
no,
Yeah, through the chair.
We just all
it's
interject at the top?
actually,
Yeah.
thank you. I was just about to say that. So, I'd like actually to go to Philip for,
Madam Chair,
and
I might be able to give you advice.
actually through the chair has actually said that she would like, in response to the discussion that we've had around the table, I think it would be invaluable to have an opinion from an experienced independent person.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Okay, so with your point of order, what actually are we in breach of?
I think I should be.
The fact that, would you like the actual number?
No, I would just like to ask why you are calling a point of order.
Because I feel everyone around the table should be able to.
Okay, so actually, if you research what point of orders are, everybody around the table is able to have a discussion. I'm just pausing it at the moment as chair, just for some advice and some information. Then we will go back to discussing it around the table. There actually has been no breach in rules of the committee as such. So over to you, please, as independent chair of order.
Point of order as well. If Philip Jones is here as a member of the public gallery, I'm just interested in what part of the standing orders we have a right as council to ask someone in the public gallery a question around.
Actually not here as public gallery, he's here as our independent chair of risk and assurance. And as the chair, I am entitled and allowed to ask for some advice. And we will be having that advice tabled. It will enable us to have a more fulsome discussion. So just hold fire for a moment.
Point of order. Point of order.
No more points of order. This is getting out of control. The chair has moved that we are going to have some independent advice. I'm asking you all respectfully if we can listen to that advice, and then I will go around the table. Mayor Ron had his hand up for the second discussion, and then Councillor Cretney. So we will continue in that process. We are keeping order around here, please, and respect.
Thank you, Madam. I'll just talk about the risk of delay, right? I won't talk about the office of the community or the legal issue because that's outside of my jurisdiction. And just for elected members' knowledge, it is very common for independent chairs to provide advice to committees and council through this process. In terms of the risk for delay, there is highlighted in the audit, the agenda today, there was the audit timetable. If we miss the delay, if we miss our window with Audit New Zealand and actually having a completed LTP, the risk is we go to the bottom of the queue in terms of our priority. I had a discussion with another council on this matter with the Assistant Auditor General, Mark Maloney, and I had Stephen Walker, who's the Executive Director of Audit New Zealand, as well as the Audit Director, where there was a council talking about delaying their LTP. They said if we miss their deadline, that they would be unlikely to meet the statutory deadline of adopting it by 30th of June. So that is another risk that council must consider when it decides to delay the process. What is the consequence in terms of the timeline to adopt the LTP within the timeline that meets all its requirements because of the inability of audit to complete their work, which is a requirement before you can adopt your LTP. You've got to have an audited opinion. before you can set your rates. So that's the risk, another risk that council needs to consider.
Thank you. Mayor Ron, you were the next one to speak.
yeah.
So we're speaking to the motion that is on the table.
We are, yeah. If I had been given a point of order, I would have asked you, Madam Chair, and that advice impacts on this. Are you required to pass a is the hearing committee required to pass a resolution to bring another independent advisor to the table, or is the standing orders and the terms of reference just give you that ability to make an arbitrary decision of your own? That's what I would have asked, but I think we'll move forward and we'll just note that for later consideration. My points that I would make, and I need to say, I've had no discussion with Councillor Aileen about this motion at all, so I'm quite surprised. But from my perspective, pleased that she's put it, because it has generated discussion that needs to be had. Can I give a little bit of advice? The question around optics, if you look at page 4 of the CE's paper, it highlights the very point that the Auditor General highlighted for me, which is materiality. And his emphasis around the question of materiality was quite firm, in the sense that material, and you can read it there. Can I draw your attention to the line that says, you need to read the whole thing to get the context. So I'm not asking you just focus on 2 words. I will go through it. Material means for the purposes of forming an opinion on a public entity's financial and performance information, a statement, an omission, a fact or item of such a nature or amount that its disclosure or the method of treating it, given full consideration of the circumstances applying at the time the financial and performance information is completed, could reasonably be expected to influence the reader's overall understanding of the financial statements and performance information and making decisions or assessments about the stewardship and the allocation of resources and the performance of that public entity. The words that are important in there could be expected to influence the reader's overall understanding. The reader's overall understanding, to be clear, is the ratepayer who's reading the consultation document. The risk in there, and which is why I raised it, and is confirmed by the Auditor General John Ryan in his email, is that it's about what people perceive you're saying when they write a submission or choose not to make a submission, compared to what they then think once they've read information further down the line that they weren't made aware of. And that's where the legal jeopardy lies. And that's a legal question based on, and part of it, talking to someone this morning prior to coming in, is whether or not you believe that there's a risk out there that someone might take a judicial review because we have contravened that specific clause. Now, in terms of optics, if we were just to say, no, we're bulldozing ahead and we're going on, we're ignoring all that because we're totally comfortable, thank you very much. What is that? How is that going to be interpreted by the reader and our behaviour and our consideration of something that we now know we do need to get a little bit of legal advice on? Or if we were to pause for one day, what they might consider then, and whether that might influence them to either put in a judicial review or not put in a judicial review. It's a risk question that the majority of this table will make a decision on, clearly, but we as a whole council, including the staff, will wear the consequences of. That's the first thing. The second point, a question, and I'm intrigued as to why there's so many questions at Councillor Aileen directly, but we'll move past that. The question around delay, okay, the email I got from John Ryan, who is the Auditor General, not his staff, says in part, and you all have a copy of this, the legal advice you obtain will assist in forming our views on whether the LTP meets the purpose statement in 93B of LGA 2002. Dependent upon the outcome of your legal advice, which read in could be positive or negative or flat and non-committal, and confirming any implications of the audit opinion, I note that you do have the advantage in this LTP round of deferring the adoption of your LTP beyond 30 June 24. This is something your council could consider. Now, that's from John Ryan. That's not from anybody else. That's not hearsay about what other councils are doing without providing me anything in writing, just to confirm that that's what other councils are doing. This is his advice. You have the advantage. And I think, from my assessment is you'll probably get a legal opinion by the end of today or possibly tomorrow morning before lunch, if I'm guessing right. So a delay and a deferment sends a larger public message, as does a plan to continue to bulldoze on. Fully understand the issues around time and your notes there, Brian, but we have the advantage of adopting the LTP beyond 30 June. Is it ideal? Maybe not according to our original plan. But if you come back to how we will be considered by the reader, I just think you need to think about that. And at the end of the day, the committee's decision is the committee's decision, and we all own it. That's all I'll say.
Councillor Cretney, you wish to speak to the motion and your seconding of the motion.
I just support the motion, but my comment is around the fact that you put to the table that we would have discussion on the motion, and then you refused His Worship to be able to speak to that motion and engaged with someone outside elected representatives.
I didn't.
That's all I'd like to say.
Pausing the discussion. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to say around this motion? I do have a comment to make. So I don't perceive there is a risk in continuing with deliberations today. This is the hearings committee. So any decisions that are made today through the hearings committee actually still go to full council. So bearing in mind, it's always good to have deliberations in a reasonable time from having heard the hearings and the submissions. I believe that if we continue with the deliberations today, I take on board all of the concerns around the table and your points, Grace, and what you have just read out, Ron. I don't believe that actually, by us finishing deliberations today, we are not making recommendations for them to be adopted for our LTP. That will go up to the full council meeting, which we have suggested be next Wednesday. That will give sufficient time for the external advice that has been sought to be received. I think that's my viewpoint. This is a hearings committee. We are not a full council meeting. The recommendations and any adoptions are by full council. Is there any more discussion? Councillor Cretney and then Mayor Ron.
Just confirming, Madam Chair, your comments just then, does that mean the recommendations in the agenda have changed?
Yeah, I think we had agreed upon that. I actually got some suggested wording for recommendations for the end of today once we've completed the deliberations. But I think the process of going through the deliberations whilst we are still here as a hearings committee is actually very beneficial. Then we can move to the recommendations at the end of the day. It's the full council that adopts the recommendations for the LTP. Right.
Okay.
Just one comment, Chair. Understand what you're saying. There's a motion on the floor, goes to the vote will decide. Can I just point out that as the Mayor who will chair the final question of yes, no on an LTP that's been deliberated in this manner. My concern is that we get to that final goal with as less animosity and as less friction and as less upset and as much unity at this table as I can enjoy to pass an LTP. If a pathway involves all of those things which are negative, I would hate to see myself and this council put in a position where the LTP fails because we have bulldozed through and used power and strength to override some concerns. Now, you can do that. I might suggest it's probably the last time an LTP will come before a hearings committee, and you need to ponder that. You can win any game, any decision, by any tactic you choose. I'm looking for the end goal, and that is something that council staff are very concerned about, and that we can pass an LTP. That's my greater concern than this little conversation at this table right now. I think you should put the vote.
Is there any more discussion? Does anybody have anything else to say before I put it to the vote? Do we have a mover and a seconder? I will now put it to the vote. All those,
Sorry, can we just read the motion?
Please read the motion.
Move that further deliberations on the LTP 2434 are paused until council is comfortable with the legality and optics of the LTP consultation document.
So that was moved by, just for clarification, by councillor Ayling and seconded by councillor Cretney. I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. We have 3 for it. That's Mayor Ron, councillor Cretney, councillor Ayling. All those against the motion, please raise their hands. So that was carried with a vote of 6-3.
No, failed.
Sorry, it's failed. Yeah, sorry. I need more coffee. The motion has failed. Thank you. So we will now move on to continue with the deliberations. I request that we actually have some really respectful discussions. It is not about anything being forced or put through. This is deliberating on the consultation process of our LTP. That's what we are here to do, is deliberate on those discussions. We're not here, we're not forcing anything. We're actually here working together as a team. And as His Worship said, that we as a team own any decisions that are made with any votes that have gone through or not gone through. So with that, I would like to move on with the deliberations. Councillor Cretney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to raise a concern, and I'd like to seek advice as to some of the decisions that were voted on last week in regards to the grants committee and conflicts of interest. So my question is around the grants committee changing their policy to not include multi-year funding and MOUs, which was the purpose of that change. And I would like to ask, is there a conflict for those people on that committee to have participated in deliberations around any requests and submissions for multi-year funding or MOUs?
Conflict of interest would arise where a council member sitting on the grants committee also sits on an entity that is applying for a grant.
So there's not a perceived bias in that the grants committee changing their policy to remove multi-year funding, then any requests for multi-year funding that come into submissions, they're automatically decided they're going to vote no on any of those requests because they've already made that decision.
It's a policy setting as opposed to a decision.
Which leads to the decision.
So I
The
think
committee's adopted a policy that, as opposed to making a decision.
Can I?
so if the committee is happy, we'll go to Philip Jones for some advice.
Okay. Can I just say, there's 2 issues right here. First of all, the conflict of interest is generally with an individual. Okay. If and I totally understand where Councillor Cretney is coming from. The issue is that, is there a predetermination by the committee that they no longer would support a multi-year grant through the LTP? The issue is that, now, I'm not 100% certain of the status of that committee. So that, correct, help me here, Mr. Chief Executive. That committee has made only a recommendation to council at this stage, or have they got delegated authority to do that? I'm uncertain as to the level of. Yes.
Committee was delegated.
Right. But so policy has accepted that policy.
So if I can.
Yeah.
I've raised this concern that at that meeting where the delegation was requested to be changed, in the paper, there were, under the points for discussion, there was nothing in there about changing or removing the ability for multi-year funding. And then when it was approved by council, the policy came to policy and projects that have been changed, and all we could do was note it. And that is where my question lies.
And those minutes are available.
The committee was delegated authority to change the policy. They had the right to change the policy. They had that delegated to them.
And as our part of our discussions last week, an action point for management was that a policy was going to be put in place regarding MOUs. So I kind of think that helps tie up all of this. I think I take on board, I think we all take on board your comments, Councillor Cretney. I think we now need to move forward and continue with these deliberations for the LTP, bearing in mind that there is going to be discussion and a review around policy of MOUs and multi-year funding going forward, sitting outside of the LTP. So if we can please move back to our deliberations. And one of the points that was asked to be discussed was the staffing levels / headcount. As I said before, that there is a consequence. Headcount and staffing levels are a consequence of our levels of service. So if we just bear that in mind. So do we have any questions for our CE or staff, or any discussion around this part of our LTP? Councillor A.
It's a question. I am eager to discuss staffing numbers, so I will get to that. But first question, if I can ask the question of the CE, I'm just asking your advice if you believe it is appropriate for the hearings panel, of which councillors have all been brought in on, if it is appropriate for the hearings panel to continue this deliberation with Robin Cherry Campbell as the chair, given the situation that unfolded last week with my exclusion and subsequent return to the table.
I believe that's a decision for governance.
Okay. I move a motion. I move a motion that the chair of the deliberations of the long-term plan hearing be altered and that the deputy chair be put in place. Do I need to reword that any more concisely?
Do we have a seconder? We have a vote on the table. Councillor Cretney has seconded that. Open this motion up for discussion. Discussion, and then we'll put it to the.
Am I allowed to discuss on my motion that I moved? I'm not.
Go for it.
Process. So I think the reason why I've moved this motion, I believe, as I've spoken on the previous motion that I raised, perception is really important in this role, and processes are really important as well. I would question the way the public will view the decision to have the chair remain in the role. following last week's situation on Wednesday and Thursday. You guys don't have access to my phone, but I have received a ridiculous number of phone calls, emails, text messages over the last week from your constituents saying how appalled they were with the process and my exclusion. I think everyone around this table should be very conscious of the fact that the decision around my exclusion, while advice had been given by Philip Jones, I might add, and others, LGNZ, the decision for me to be then brought back into the room showed that a mistake had been made. This has all been seen in the public arena. I've had communications from everyone in town, including very significant ratepayers. So I would advise the councillors to proceed with caution around continuing the long-term plan deliberations in its entirety, as I tried to raise the first motion. But if that is to continue today, I would advise we have a different chair in the role. And sure. So
just a point of order.
Yeah.
Under 26.2, C on the irrelevance, to inform the chair that the topic being discussed is not the matter currently before the meeting. So thank you for your discussion. Obviously, you're very emotional about it all.
I'm not emotional about any of this, Robin.
Yeah, I think that's very evident. Absolutely. So I will now put it to the vote. The motion for me to be replaced as chair and Councillor Dunn to be instated as chair, as deputy. So we're putting the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. We only have 2 for the motion. All those against, I'm going to, I know I've said I will never abstain as chair, but because it concerns me, I will abstain in this instance. So all those, so if that can be recorded, please, Robin. All those against the motion currently on the table, please raise your hands. Mayor Ron, are you voting?
Yes, I will be voting.
So are you for or against the
I
motion?
haven't got to abstains.
Oh, well, I just said I was abstaining, so you could have said you were.
No, that's not
Okay.
procedure in the protocol.
All right.
Yeah.
So we have
I'm
1, 2. So sorry again, who are against the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against the motion, and abstentions are from myself. Any other abstentions? Mayor on Mark. The motion has failed. We will now proceed, please, with these deliberations. Actually, in fact, I'm just going to call a 5-minute adjournment. I need to fill my water bottle up, and I'm sure
I
possibly
need to empty mine.
you need to. So we will just adjourn 5 minutes.
Didn't need that.
So we will reconvene at 11:45. Thank you.